The storm began to clear and the light shone over the horizon to reveal the city of Lannisport. Arya Stark could finally breathe a sigh of relief. She had made it home. But as her ship entered the port, she kept replaying these events over and over again in her mind. What had happened? How could she lose so much time? And where was Arianne Martell? 2 years ago, just after King Bran the Broken's coronation, Arya Stark set out to explore what was truly to the west of Westeros. She took a single ship down the narrow sea, determined to retrace the steps of Alyssa Farman's voyage. But by the time she got to Dawn, she was joined by another ship. This ship was captained by Arianne Martell, who longed for adventure. She was a free-spirited person, and the thought of exploring new lands was far too good of an opportunity to pass up, so she accompanied Arya Stark on her voyage. But as they reached the open ocean, the tide began to turn, and their ships were engulfed by terrible storms, battering winds, and huge whirlpools. This went on for months, and it was only by some sort of miracle did they survive this. But they were able to survive, and they came so close to the Targaryen Islands, the furthest west that anyone had ever travelled to and returned from. A great sense of excitement gripped Arya's heart, for this was truly where the maps ended. But just before they reached the islands, their ships were engulfed by another storm, this one far larger than any they'd seen before. The winds were so great that it ripped the sails from their ships. Huge waves crashed against the hull, splintering its wood. Arya lost sight of Arianne's ship, but before she could react, she was knocked unconscious by falling debris. By the time Arya and her crew awoke, they were miles off course. In fact, as far as they could tell, the closest bit of land to them was the Westerlands. How could they have travelled so far? But this did not matter, as their ship was barely seaworthy, so they had to get to land quickly. When Arya arrived in Lannisport, she was met by cheering crowds and thunderous applause. She was then greeted by Lord Tyrion Lannister. He could barely contain his excitement at the thought of hearing Arya's tales. Arya smiled as she walked towards Tyrion, but before she could talk to him, she was interrupted by several warriors in plate armor. They were wearing the king's colours. The lead warrior, a knight, approached Arya Stark and said, "Welcome back, my lady. The king eagerly awaits your presence at the capital." Arya smiled. "Why, thank you. Please tell my brother I will be more than happy to see him just after I've eaten, rested, and caught up with my friends." She turned to face Tyrion again, but the knight stood between them both, so close he was almost touching her. The mood changed as the knight stared at her. "I'm sorry, my lady. That was not a request." Arya quickly surveyed the situation. The knight had his hand on his sword, and all the warriors who had accompanied him had begun to quietly surround Arya. She also noted 2 others in the back. These were crossbowmen. Arya believed that she could take these men on without issue, but the amount of trouble killing the king's men in Lannisport would cause for Tyrion was unfair. So she simply smiled, said goodbye to Lord Tyrion, and said, "Lead on," to the knight. Welcome back, everyone, to my fan-made Game of Thrones spin-off series called A Folly of Thrones. This is a series of my own creation which looks at what might have happened after the end of Game of Thrones. Trust me, you're gonna want to stick around for this season.